Sir, you need to move to the back right now. This section is for our premium passengers only. Megan Crawford's voice cut through the cabin like a knife. Her perfectly manicured finger pointed toward the back of the aircraft, her lips pressed into a thin line of barely concealed contempt. Darnell Washington looked up from his phone, his expression unchanged. He wore a simple navy polo khakis that had seen better days and sneakers that looked like they had walked 1,000 miles. "Ma'am, I'm in my assigned seat." Those 6 words would change everything. What happened next over the course of 30 minutes would shut down an entire airline, destroy careers, and spark a movement that transformed an industry forever. Before we continue, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and follow this story until the very end. Drop a comment below telling me which city you are watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled around the world. Now let me take you back to Gate 17 at Los Angeles International Airport, where a quiet man in worn sneakers was about to bring a billion-dollar corporation to its knees. The afternoon sun streamed through the massive windows of LAX Terminal 4 as passengers shuffled toward Gate 17. Flight 892 to Chicago was boarding, and Darnell Washington had arrived early as he always did. 47 years of life had taught him that preparation was everything. Patience was power, and the ability to read a room before anyone noticed you were watching could mean the difference between victory and defeat. He stood in the priority boarding line, his beat-up backpack slung over one shoulder. The woman in front of him turned around. Designer labels head to toe. Louis Vuitton carry-on. Diamond earrings catching the light. Her eyes traveled from his polo shirt to his khakis to his sneakers, and her lip curled before she turned away without a word. Darnell noticed. He always noticed. 30 years in business had made him an expert at reading the silent language of contempt, but he had stopped letting such glances affect him long ago. He had a board meeting in Chicago, a merger that needed his attention, a foundation gala that weekend where he would present scholarships to 12 first-generation college students. He had bigger things on his mind than one woman's silent judgment. When his turn came, he handed his boarding pass to the gate agent. Her name tag read Brittany, and her smile seemed genuine. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Washington. First class seat 2A. Enjoy your flight." "Thank you, Brittany." He walked down the jetway, footsteps silent on the carpeted floor. The aircraft was a Boeing 757 one he had flown dozens of times. He turned left into the first-class cabin and found his seat. Window, exactly what he had requested 3 weeks ago when he booked the ticket. He settled in, stowed his backpack, and pulled out his phone. The leather seat was comfortable. The cabin was quiet. A few passengers were already seated, absorbed in their phones and laptops. Everything was normal. 3 minutes later, a shadow fell across him. "Sir?" Darnell looked up. The flight attendant standing over him had blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail and a Continental Pacific uniform pressed to perfection. Her name tag read Megan Crawford. Her expression read something else entirely. "Yes, sir, you need to move to the back right now. This section is for our premium passengers only." Darnell felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger, not yet. Just the familiar weight of a moment he had lived through too many times before. "I'm sorry, there must be some confusion. I'm in seat 2A, first class." Megan's eyes narrowed. She didn't look at his seat. She didn't check her tablet. She just looked at him. "Sir, I don't know how you got up here, but this section is for passengers who actually purchased first-class tickets. You'll need to move to your seat and coach." Darnell reached for his boarding pass. He held it up, the Continental Pacific logo clearly visible, the words "First Class" printed in bold letters. "Seat 2A. First class. Purchased 3 weeks ago." Megan barely glanced at it. Her lip curled in a way that reminded him of the woman in the boarding line. "That has to be a mistake in the system. Let me see your ID." Darnell handed over his driver's license. Megan examined it like a detective searching for evidence of fraud. She turned it over, held it up to the light, compared the photo to his face. The examination went on for nearly 30 seconds. "This doesn't prove anything. Where did you really get this boarding pass?" Darnell kept his voice steady. "I purchased it. On your website, 3 weeks ago. Would you like to see the confirmation email?" Megan ignored the offer. "Sir, I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and move to coach. Now." A passenger in seat 1A looked up from his Wall Street Journal. Silver hair, expensive suit, Rolex on his wrist, the kind of tan that came from weekends on a yacht. "Is there a problem here?" Megan's entire demeanor transformed. Her voice became warm, almost sweet. "Nothing to worry about, Mr. Hoffman. This gentleman seems to be confused about his seat assignment." "I'm handling it." Gerald Hoffman set down his newspaper and looked at Darnell. His eyes made the same journey everyone else's had made. Polo shirt, khakis, sneakers, backpack. "Son, maybe you should just go to your real seat. No need to cause trouble." Darnell turned to face him. "I'm 47 years old, and I'm in my real seat. Gerald's face reddened. "I'm trying to help you here. Just go to coach and stop making a scene." "I'm not making a scene. I'm sitting in a seat I paid for." Megan stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. Move to your correct seat or I will call the captain." "My correct seat is 2A, first class, which is exactly where I'm sitting." She reached for the intercom on the wall. "Fine. Have it your way." While Megan made her call, Darnell pulled out his phone and opened the Continental Pacific app. His mobile boarding pass glowed on the screen. Flight 892, Seat 2A, First Class. He set it on the tray table where anyone could see it. Another flight attendant appeared. Younger than Megan. Dark hair. Nervous eyes. Her name tag read Rachel Torres. "What's going on?" Megan's voice carried across the entire first-class cabin. "This gentleman is trying to scam a first-class seat. He has fake documents and he's refusing to move to coach where he belongs." Rachel looked at the boarding pass on the tray table. She looked at the mobile pass on his phone. She looked at Darnell. "Megan, his documents look legitimate to me." "Rachel, I've been doing this job for 12 years. I know a scammer when I see one." "Look at him. Does he look like a first-class passenger to you?" The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Ripples of silence spread through the cabin. "Does he look like a first-class passenger?" A woman in seat 3A set down her medical journal. She was in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of direct gaze that came from decades of making life-and-death decisions. "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear." "What exactly does a first-class passenger look like?" Megan turned to her with a forced smile. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. I'm Dr. Evelyn Carter, Chief of Surgery at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I've been a Continental Pacific customer for 15 years. And I'm asking you a direct question. What does a first-class passenger look like?" Megan's smile flickered. "I simply meant that there are certain indicators of what wealth status the right skin color am. I never said anything about. You didn't have to." Gerald Hoffman made a sound of disgust. "Oh, here we go. Everything's about race these days. The man probably made an honest mistake booking his ticket. Just let him go to coach and we can all get on with our day." Dr. Carter turned to him. "Mr. Hoffman, this man has shown a valid boarding pass, a valid ID, and he's sitting in the seat printed on his ticket. What mistake exactly has he made?" Gerald opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Well, obviously there's been some kind of computer error, and that's his fault." Before Gerald could answer, the cockpit door opened. Captain Robert Miller emerged. 55 years old. Silver hair, 20 years of experience. He walked with the confidence of a man accustomed to being in command. "What's the problem here?" Megan stepped forward. Relief evident in her voice. "Captain, this passenger is in the wrong seat and refuses to move. He's being disruptive, and I believe he may have fraudulent documents." Captain Miller looked at Darnell. His eyes made the journey. Polo shirt, khakis, sneakers. The assessment took less than 2 seconds. "Sir, I need you to move to your correct seat in coach." Darnell held up his boarding pass. "Captain, this is my correct seat. 2A, first class. Here's my boarding pass. Here's my ID. Here's my Platinum Elite card showing 400,000 miles flown with your airline." Captain Miller didn't look at any of it. "Son, I've been flying for 20 years. I know when someone's trying to scam an upgrade. I'm not your son. I'm a paying customer, and I'm not scamming anything." Captain Miller's jaw tightened. "You have 2 choices. Move to coach voluntarily, or security will escort you off this aircraft." "For what?" "Sitting in my assigned seat for being disruptive and refusing to comply with crew instructions." "I haven't been disruptive. I've been defending my right to sit in a seat I paid for." Dr. Carter stood up. "Captain, I've been watching this entire interaction. This man has not raised his voice once. He has not made any threatening gestures. He has answered every question calmly and provided every document requested. The only disruption I've witnessed has come from your crew." Captain Miller's eyes flickered to her. "Ma'am, please stay out of this. I will not stay out of it. What I'm witnessing appears to be textbook discrimination." A businessman in seat 5A looked up from his laptop. He was in his 50s with sharp eyes and the measured demeanor of someone who spent his life in courtrooms. "Captain, I'm Thomas Reed, partner at Morrison & Reed in Chicago. I specialize in civil rights litigation, and I have to tell you what I'm watching right now could constitute a federal civil rights violation." Captain Miller's confident expression wavered for the first time. "This is a safety issue." "No, it isn't. This is a profiling issue. And you're creating significant legal liability for your airline with every passing second." Megan's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, should I call security?" Captain Miller hesitated. He looked at Darnell. He looked at Dr. Carter. He looked at Thomas Reed. He looked at the other passengers in first class, several of whom had stopped pretending not to watch. Yes, make the call. Megan reached for the intercom with barely concealed satisfaction. Ground security, this is flight 892 at gate 17. We have a passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions. Request immediate assistance. A young woman in seat 4B had been watching everything unfold. Her name was Destiny Williams. She was 28 years old with natural hair and 300,000 followers across her social media platforms. She had been quietly recording for the past several minutes. Now she went live. Y'all, I'm on Continental Pacific Flight 892 and you need to see what's happening right now. This man has shown his boarding pass, his ID, his frequent flyer card, everything, and they are still trying to remove him from his first class seat. Her viewer count began climbing immediately. 100, 200, 500. The comments started flowing. What's happening? Is this for real? Someone needs to sue this airline. Gerald Hoffman noticed the phone. Are you recording this? Destiny didn't flinch. Yes, sir, I am. That's probably illegal. Actually, Mr. Hoffman Thomas Reed said without looking up from his own phone in California, you can record in any situation where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy. An aircraft cabin during boarding is a public space. Gerald's face went purple. This is ridiculous. Dr. Carter crossed her arms. What's ridiculous is that a man can't sit in his own seat without being treated like a criminal. 2 security officers appeared at the aircraft door. The first was Marcus Johnson, a 20-year veteran with calm eyes and a steady presence. The second was Diana Reyes, younger but equally professional. What's the situation, Johnson asked. Captain Miller stepped forward. This passenger is in the wrong seat and refuses to move. He may have fraudulent documents. Johnson looked at Darnell, who was sitting quietly with his hands visible, making no aggressive movements whatsoever. Sir, may I see your documentation? Darnell handed everything over without protest. Boarding pass, driver's license, platinum elite card. Johnson examined each item carefully. He compared the photo to Darnell's face. He checked the seat number on the boarding pass against the seat where Darnell was sitting. He ran his finger over the platinum elite card. Then he looked at Captain Miller. Captain, these documents are legitimate. Boarding pass shows seat 2A first class. ID matches the name on the boarding pass. Platinum elite status with over 400,000 miles. Megan stepped forward. They're obviously fake. He probably bought them online. Johnson raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, this boarding pass has a valid QR code generated by your airline system. The hologram on this ID is genuine, and this Platinum Elite card has an embedded chip that can be verified. These aren't fake. Megan's face flushed. Will these people know how to work the system? The cabin went dead silent. Marcus Johnson went very still. His partner, Diana Reyes, closed her eyes. Dr. Carter's voice was ice. Excuse me. Did you just say these people? Megan realized her mistake. Her flush deepened. I meant scammers. People who try to scam upgrades. That's not what you said. Destiny spoke directly to her camera, her voice shaking with anger. Y'all heard that right? She just said these people. This man has shown every single document they asked for, and she just said these people. Her viewer count hit 2,000. The hashtag Continental Discrimination appeared in her comments. It began to spread. Thomas Reed stood up slowly. Captain Miller, I'm going to give you some free legal advice. What your crew member just said, combined with the treatment this passenger has received, has created a situation that could cost your airline millions of dollars. I strongly suggest you reconsider your approach. Captain Miller's face had gone pale, but his jaw remained set. This is still a safety issue. The passenger has been disruptive. How? Dr. Carter demanded. By sitting quietly in his seat, by politely answering questions, by providing documentation. Captain Miller had no answer. A voice crackled over the radio. Ground supervisor to gate 17, Karen Mitchell en route. ETA 2 minutes? Darnell spoke for the first time in several minutes. Captain Miller, how long have you been flying for Continental Pacific? 20 years. In those 20 years, how many times have you removed a passenger from first class for sitting in their assigned seat with valid documentation? Captain Miller didn't answer. I've flown 400,000 miles with this airline. I've never once been late for a flight. Never once caused a disturbance. Never once had a complaint filed against me, and yet today I'm being treated like a criminal. Why do you think that is? The question hung in the air. Gerald Hoffman muttered something under his breath. Dr. Carter rounded on him. What was that, Mr. Hoffman? Gerald's face contorted. I said maybe if he dressed like he belonged in first class, there wouldn't be a problem. Dressed like he belonged, Dr. Carter repeated. And what exactly does belonging look like, Mr. Hoffman? You know what I mean. I'm afraid I don't. Please enlighten me. Gerald threw up his hands. A suit. A tie. something that shows he can actually afford to be here. Darnell looked at him. Mr. Hoffman, I could buy this entire aircraft with what I made last quarter, but that's not the point. The point is that my clothing shouldn't determine how I'm treated. My documentation should. Gerald snorted. Everyone's got a story, and everyone deserves basic respect. Karen Mitchell arrived at the aircraft door. She was 48 years old, efficient, and accustomed to being the final word in any dispute at LAX Terminal 4. What's going on here? Captain Miller stepped forward with evident relief. We have a passenger in the wrong seat who refuses to move. Security has been unable to resolve the situation. Karen looked at Darnell. Her eyes made the familiar journey. Sir, I'm the ground supervisor. May I see your documentation? Darnell handed everything over for what felt like the 100th time. Karen examined each item. She typed something into her tablet. She frowned at the screen. She typed again. Mr. Washington, and according to our system, you did purchase a first-class ticket. Darnell felt a small measure of hope. However, Karen continued. Given the crew's concerns about your behavior during this incident, I think it's best if we reseat you in coach for this flight. We'll refund the difference, of course. Destiny's jaw dropped. Wait, y'all heard that right? She just admitted his ticket is legitimate, and they're still trying to move him to coach. Her viewer count hit 5,000. The comments exploded. This is insane. Sue them into oblivion. Who is this guy? He's handling this so well. Someone find out his name. Thomas Reed shook his head. Ma'am, you just admitted his documentation is valid. On what grounds are you reseating him? He's been disruptive. He's been sitting in his seat answering questions. That's not disruption. The crew has expressed concerns. The crew has expressed bias. There's a difference. Karen's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Sir, I don't have time to argue. Mr. Washington, you can take the coach seat I'm offering, or you can take the next flight to Chicago. Those are your options. Darnell looked at her for a long moment. I remember you, he said quietly. Karen frowned. Excuse me. 3 years ago, Gate 42. You helped me resolve an issue with a connecting flight. You were professional, courteous, and efficient. I wrote a letter to your supervisor commending your service. Karen's frown deepened. I don't remember that. I do. I remember every act of kindness I've received from this airline, just like I remember every act of disrespect. The words landed with unexpected weight. Karen's expression flickered with something that might have been uncertainty. Then it hardened again. Mr. Washington, I need your decision. Coach seat or next flight? Darnell looked at his watch. It was a Patek Philippe Nautilus worth more than $50,000. Karen noticed it for the first time. Her eyes widened slightly. That's a very expensive watch. It is. How did you afford it? Karen's face reddened. I didn't mean yes you did. And that's the problem. You see a black man in casual clothes and you assume he couldn't possibly afford first class, or an expensive watch, or anything else that might suggest success. Sir, I never said you didn't have to. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Carter spoke into it. Mr. Washington, I want you to know that whatever happens next, I will be filing a formal complaint with the airline, with the FAA, with the Department of Transportation, and with every media outlet that will listen. Thomas Reed nodded. And I'll be representing you if you choose to pursue legal action. Pro bono. Destiny held up her phone. And 12,000 people are watching this right now. Continental Pacific, the world is watching. 12,000. The number had climbed while Darnell wasn't paying attention. Karen's radio crackled. Supervisor Mitchell, please hold your position. Regional Director Patterson is being contacted. Karen's face went pale. The regional director, she looked at Darnell with new uncertainty. Who are you? Darnell reached into his backpack. He pulled out a leather business card holder. He selected one card and handed it to Karen. She read it. Her face went from pale to white. Oh my God, Gerald Hoffman leaned forward. What does it say? Karen didn't answer. She was staring at Darnell like she had never seen him before. Captain Miller stepped forward. Karen, what's going on? Karen handed him the card with trembling fingers. Captain Miller read it. His face went through the same transformation Karen's had. That's not possible. Megan pushed forward. What? What's on the card? Captain Miller handed it to her without a word. Megan read it. The color drained from her face. Darnell Washington, Chief Executive Officer, Washington Holdings International. Destiny's camera caught everything. Chat something just happened. They all just read his business card and they look like they've seen a ghost. Does anyone know who Washington Holdings is? The comments exploded. Washington Holdings is a $4 billion company. He owns like 200 businesses. This man is a billionaire and they tried to send him to coach. Continental Pacific is finished. Thomas Reed was already on his phone searching. Washington Holdings International, diversified conglomerate, annual revenue $4.7 billion. Holdings include real estate, technology, manufacturing, and he stopped. And what Dr. Carter asked. Reed looked up at Darnell with something like awe, and a 31% stake in Continental Pacific Airlines. The silence that followed was absolute. Karen Mitchell's radio crackled to life. Supervisor Mitchell CEO Victoria Chen is on the line. She needs to speak with Darnell Washington immediately, priority alpha. Darnell checked his watch. Right on schedule? He looked at Karen, at Captain Miller, at Megan, at Gerald Hoffman. Shall we continue this conversation? Karen's voice was barely a whisper. Mr. Washington, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Darnell's response was quiet, but carried to every corner of the cabin. I know you didn't. That's exactly the point. A customer's treatment shouldn't depend on who they are. It should be consistent and respectful for everyone. He reached into his backpack again. But since we're sharing information, there are a few more things you should know. He pulled out a folder. 8 months ago, Washington Holdings acquired a 31% stake in Continental Pacific Airlines. That makes us the majority shareholder. Captain Miller staggered backward. Last year, my foundation donated $750,000 to Continental Pacific's Diversity and Inclusion Training Program. Karen's knees buckled. She grabbed the seat beside her for support. And personally, I have flown 400,000 miles with this airline over 8 years. 78 flights last year alone. Platinum Elite status since 2017. He set the folder on the tray table. I have tried to help this airline become better. Today I experienced firsthand how badly that help is needed. Destiny Williams was crying. Y'all, she said to her camera, her voice breaking. This man has given this airline almost $1 million to fight discrimination, and they just discriminated against him. Her viewer count hit 25,000. The hashtag Continental Discrimination hit #1 trending. And in boardrooms and living rooms and airports around the world, people stopped what they were doing to watch what would happen next. Darnell Washington remained seated in 2A first class, exactly where he belonged. The airline had 30 minutes before it would never be the same again. Karen Mitchell's radio crackled again, more urgent this time. Supervisor Mitchell CEO Victoria Chen is holding on line 1. She says it's a code red emergency. Do not delay. Karen's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the radio. She looked at Darnell, then at Captain Miller, then back at Darnell. Her mouth opened and closed twice before any words came out. Mr. Washington, I need to take this call. Please just wait. Darnell nodded once. I'm not going anywhere. Karen stumbled toward the gate podium, her professional composure completely shattered. Captain Miller stood frozen in the aisle, still holding the business card like it might explode in his hands. Megan Crawford had backed against the bulkhead, her face the color of old paper. Gerald Hoffman broke the silence first. This has to be some kind of mistake. He can't possibly be who he says he is. Anyone can print a business card. Thomas Reed turned to him with barely concealed contempt. Mr. Hoffman, I just pulled up Washington Holdings on my phone. There's a photo of Mr. Washington on their corporate website. It's him. There's no mistake. Gerald's face went through several colors in rapid succession. Well, even so, how are we supposed to know? He doesn't exactly look like a CEO. Dr. Carter's voice could have frozen water. And what does a CEO look like, Mr. Hoffman? Gerald sputtered. You know what I mean. A suit, a briefcase flying private, not dressed like he's going to a barbecue. Darnell turned to look at him. Mr. Hoffman, I have a private jet. I chose to fly commercial today because I believe in understanding how my investments operate at ground level. I wanted to experience what regular customers experience, and I have to say the experience has been educational. Gerald's face went purple. You were testing us. I wasn't testing anyone. I was simply trying to fly from Los Angeles to Chicago. Your crew and your fellow passengers made assumptions about me based on my appearance. I didn't set that trap. You walked into it yourselves. Destiny Williams spoke to her camera. Y'all, this man owns part of the airline. He has a private jet, and he flew commercial just to see how regular people get treated. And look what happened. 28,000 people watching now. Keep sharing this. At the gate podium, Karen Mitchell was on the phone with Victoria Chen. Even from 30 feet away, everyone could hear Victoria's voice coming through the speaker. Karen, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Every detail. And I need you to put me on speaker so Mr. Washington can hear this conversation. Karen's hands were shaking as she pressed the speaker button. You're on speaker, Ms. Chen. Darnell, are you there? I'm here, Victoria. The passengers in first class exchanged glances. The CEO of Continental Pacific Airlines was on a first-name basis with this man. The full weight of what had happened was beginning to sink in. Darnell, I just got out of an emergency board meeting. Our stock has dropped 4.2% in the last 45 minutes. The hashtag Continental Discrimination is trending #1 nationally. We have 3 news networks requesting statements. What the hell happened at Gate 17? Darnell's voice was calm, almost conversational. Victoria, I arrived for my flight. I was seated in my assigned first-class seat. Your flight attendant, Megan Crawford, told me to move to coach because, and I'm quoting here, this section is for premium passengers only. When I showed her my boarding pass, she said it must be a mistake. When I showed her my ID, she said it didn't prove anything. When I showed her my Platinum Elite card, she said I probably bought it online. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Please tell me you're joking. I'm afraid not. Your Captain Robert Miller was called to intervene. He didn't look at any of my documentation. He called me son and said he knows a scammer when he sees one. He called security. Security verified my documents were legitimate. Your ground supervisor, Karen Mitchell, acknowledged my ticket was valid, but still tried to reseat me in coach because of, and I'm quoting again, the crew's concerns about my behavior. What behavior? Sitting quietly in my seat and answering questions. Another long pause. Darnell, I am so deeply sorry. I appreciate that, Victoria, but I'm not the one who needs to hear it. What do you mean? Darnell looked around the cabin at the passengers who had defended him, at Destiny still live streaming, at Dr. Carter standing with her arms crossed, at Thomas Reed taking notes on his phone. There are approximately 30,000 people watching a live stream of this incident right now. Your apology needs to be public. Victoria's voice tightened. Darnell, a public apology could create significant legal liability. Victoria, your legal liability is already significant. You have a choice between controlled damage and uncontrolled catastrophe. The world is watching. What do you want them to see? The silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. Then Victoria Chen's voice came through the speaker, stronger now. You're right. Karen, are the passengers still there? Yes, ma'am. Most of first class is listening. Good. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Victoria Chen, CEO of Continental Pacific Airlines. I want to publicly apologize for the treatment Mr. Washington received today. His treatment was unacceptable, discriminatory, and a violation of everything our airline claims to stand for. There will be consequences for the employees involved, and there will be systemic changes to ensure this never happens again. Destiny held her phone higher, making sure every word was captured. Y'all, the CEO of the airline is apologizing live. 32,000 viewers now. This is historic. Gerald Hoffman stood up abruptly. Now wait just a minute. This whole thing has been blown out of proportion. The flight attendant made an honest mistake. There's no need to destroy people's careers over a misunderstanding. Dr. Carter rounded on him. A misunderstanding. She looked at him and decided he didn't belong. That's not a misunderstanding. That's discrimination. She was just doing her job. Her job is to verify tickets and ensure passenger safety. Her job is not to decide who looks like they belong in first class. Victoria Chen's voice cut through the argument. Who is speaking? Gerald puffed up. Gerald Hoffman, Hoffman Development Group. I'm a loyal Continental Pacific customer, and I think this whole situation is being handled poorly. Your employee made a judgment call. That's what employees are supposed to do. Mr. Hoffman, did you witness what happened? I was sitting right there in 1A. And what did you observe? I observed a gentleman who didn't appear to belong in first class being asked to verify his credentials. Standard procedure. Darnell spoke quietly. Mr. Hoffman, you told me to go to my real seat. You called me son. You said maybe if I dressed like I belonged, there wouldn't be a problem. Victoria's voice was ice. Mr. Hoffman, did you say those things? Gerald's face contorted. I was trying to defuse the situation by telling a paying first-class passenger to go to coach I didn't know who he was. That's exactly the point, Darnell said. You assumed I didn't belong because of how I looked. You didn't ask to see my ticket. You didn't ask if there had been a mistake. You just assumed the flight attendant was right and I was wrong. Gerald's voice rose. This is ridiculous. I'm being attacked for trying to be helpful. Thomas Reed stepped forward. Mr. Hoffman, as an attorney, I would strongly advise you to stop talking. Everything you say is being recorded by thousands of people. You're digging yourself deeper with every word. Gerald's face went from purple to white. This is a setup. This whole thing was a setup. Mr. Hoffman, Darnell said quietly. I have never met you before today. I had no idea you would be on this flight. I had no idea your flight attendant would decide I didn't belong in first class. There was no setup. There was just you and her making assumptions about me based on my appearance. Gerald opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. For the first time, he seemed to realize the magnitude of what had happened. Victoria Chen's voice came through the speaker again. Mr. Washington, what do you need from us to resolve this situation? Darnell looked around the cabin, at Megan Crawford still pressed against the bulkhead, at Captain Miller still holding the business card, at Karen Mitchell clutching her radio like a lifeline. Victoria, I think this conversation would be better held in a more formal setting, but I want to be clear about one thing. Go ahead. This isn't about me. I have resources, I have lawyers, I have a platform. I can fight back. But what about the thousands of passengers who experience this kind of treatment every year and don't have those things? What happens to them? The question hung in the air. Dr. Carter spoke into the silence. I've seen it happen. At airports, at hotels, at restaurants. People being treated differently because of how they look. Most of them just accept it because fighting back is too hard, too exhausting, too risky. Mr. Washington is right. This isn't about one incident. It's about a pattern. Victoria's voice was subdued. You're right, Dr. Carter, and that pattern ends today. Destiny spoke to her camera. 38,000 viewers. The CEO just said the pattern ends today. Let's hold her to that. Karen Mitchell stepped forward hesitantly. Miss Chen, what would you like me to do, Karen? I want you to personally escort Mr. Washington back to his seat. I want you to ensure he receives the service he paid for. And I want you to document everything that happened today in writing. Every word, every action, every person involved. Yes, ma'am. Captain Miller finally found his voice. Ms. Chen, what about the flight? We're already significantly delayed. Captain Miller Victoria said the delay is the least of your concerns right now. I'll be reviewing your conduct personally when you return to Los Angeles. Captain Miller's face went gray. Ms. Chen, I was just following protocol. What protocol instructs you to call a paying customer's son and accuse him of being a scammer without verifying his documents? Captain Miller had no answer. There was a commotion at the gate door. A woman in a Continental Pacific uniform rushed in, her face flushed, her breathing rapid. I'm Jennifer Hayes, Regional Director. I came as soon as I heard. She stopped short when she saw Darnell. Mr. Washington, I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea you were on this flight. Ms. Hayes, Darnell said calmly, would you have treated me differently if you had known who I was? Jennifer Hayes opened her mouth, then closed it. The question had no good answer. Victoria Chen's voice came through the speaker. That's the right question, Darnell. Jennifer, the answer should be no. Every passenger should be treated with the same respect and dignity regardless of who they are. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. But that's not what happened today. No, ma'am. It isn't. Darnell stood up slowly. He gathered his backpack and his documents. Victoria, I'm going to take my seat now. My actual seat in first class where I paid to sit. We can continue this conversation after I land in Chicago. Of course. And Darnell. Yes, thank you for handling this with grace. Most people in your position would have lost their temper. You maintained your dignity throughout. Darnell looked at the faces around him, at the passengers who had defended him, at those who had attacked him, at those who had simply watched. Victoria, losing my temper wouldn't have changed anything. Systems don't change because of anger. They change because of pressure, sustained and strategic. That's what today is about. He turned and walked back toward his seat. Megan Crawford was still pressed against the bulkhead. As Darnell passed her, she spoke for the first time in nearly 15 minutes. Mr. Washington, I am so sorry. I didn't know. Darnell stopped and looked at her. Miss Crawford, when you approached me, what did you see? Megan's eyes filled with tears. I saw someone who didn't fit what she couldn't answer. You saw a black man in casual clothes sitting in first class, and you assumed I didn't belong there. You didn't check the manifest. You didn't verify my boarding pass. You just decided based on how I looked that I must be in the wrong seat. Megan was crying now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Miss Crawford, I've spent my entire life watching people make assumptions about me. What college I could get into, what jobs I could handle, what neighborhoods I could live in, what seats I could sit in. Every single time I've had to prove myself, show my credentials, justify my presence. Today was no different, he paused. But today, 40,000 people are watching, and maybe just maybe that will make someone think twice before they look at a person and decide they don't belong. He continued to his seat and sat down. Karen Mitchell approached hesitantly. Mr. Washington, can I get you anything? A drink? Something to eat? Whatever you need. Darnell looked at her. Karen, do you remember now? 3 years ago, gate 42. Karen's brow furrowed. Then her eyes widened. The connecting flight to Seattle. You were trying to make a meeting and your flight was canceled due to weather. You got me on another carrier. You made calls, pulled strings, went above and beyond. I made that meeting because of you. Karen's eyes filled with tears. I remember now. I have sent a letter to my supervisor. You said I was one of the best customer service representatives you'd ever encountered. You were. Today you were something else. Karen flinched. Mr. Washington, I don't know what to say. When I saw you today, I didn't recognize you. I just saw another passenger causing a problem. A black passenger causing a problem. Karen closed her eyes. Yes. And you never stopped to wonder if maybe the problem wasn't me. No, I assumed the crew was right. I assumed you were wrong. Why? Because that's always how it is. Crew says there's a problem. Passenger, there's a problem, passenger. I didn't question it. Darnell nodded slowly. Karen, that's the problem. Not just with you, with the entire system. Assumptions get made. Nobody questions them. And people like me pay the price. Dr. Carter had returned to her seat, but she was still listening. He's right, she said. In medicine, we call it diagnostic bias. You see a patient, you make assumptions based on their appearance, their background, their manner of speaking. Those assumptions affect the care they receive. Sometimes it costs people their lives. Thomas Reed nodded. In law, we see it every day. Who gets arrested? Who gets charged? Who gets convicted? The system isn't blind. It sees color class, everything society tells it to see. Destiny Williams was still streaming. 43,000 viewers, she said. Y'all are watching history. This isn't just about one man on one airplane, this is about all of us. Victoria Chen's voice came through Karen's radio one more time. Darnell, I'm sending my personal contact information to your phone. I want to meet with you as soon as possible to discuss substantive changes. Not just at Continental Pacific. Industry-wide. Will you help me? Darnell looked out the window at the tarmac. Victoria, I've been trying to help for years. Today is the first time anyone's actually asked. I'm asking now, then I'll help. But I want to be clear about something. What's that? This can't be about damage control. It can't be about PR. It has to be about real change. Training programs, accountability measures, anonymous reporting systems, regular audits, and consequences. Real consequences for people who discriminate. You have my word. Your word is a start. Your actions will be what matters. The flight crew for the Chicago leg had been replaced. A new captain, Angela Reyes, entered the cabin. She was in her 50s, professional, with kind eyes. She walked directly to Darnell's seat. Mr. Washington, I'm Captain Angela Reyes. I'll be commanding this flight. On behalf of Continental Pacific Airlines, I want to apologize for what you experienced. It should never have happened. Captain Reyes, thank you, but you don't need to apologize for something you didn't do. I'm apologizing for the airline, for the culture that allowed this to happen, for the failure of leadership that made today possible. You deserve better. Every passenger deserves better. She extended her hand. Darnell shook it. It's nice to meet you, Captain Reyes. I look forward to a smooth flight. You'll have one, I promise. She turned and addressed the first-class cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We'll be departing shortly. For those of you who witnessed what happened today, I want you to know that it will not be forgotten. Changes are coming to this airline. Real changes. What happened at this gate will never happen again. She returned to the cockpit. Gerald Hoffman had been sitting in silence, his Wall Street Journal abandoned on his lap. Now he stood up abruptly. I need to change my seat. Karen looked at him. Excuse me, I want to move. Away from all of this, Mr. Hoffman, Thomas Reed said quietly. You can move to a different seat, but you can't move away from what you did. That's going to follow you wherever you go. Gerald's face twisted. I didn't do anything wrong. I was trying to help. You told a paying passenger to go to his real seat. You assumed he was lying. You defended the flight attendant who was discriminating against him, and you did all of that based on his appearance. That's not what happened. 45,000 people watched it happen, Mr. Hoffman. It's recorded. It's on the internet. It will be there forever. Gerald's face went white. This is going to ruin me. Dr. Carter spoke without looking up from her journal. You should have thought of that before you opened your mouth. Gerald stumbled toward the back of first class, looking for an empty seat as far from Darnell as possible. He found one in the last row and collapsed into it, his face in his hands. Destiny ended her live stream with a message to her viewers. Y'all, what we witnessed today was incredible. A man refused to be disrespected. He stood his ground. He forced an entire airline, Garceroy, to confront its failures. And he did it without raising his voice once. That's power. That's dignity. That's what resistance looks like. Continental Pacific, the world is watching. Don't let us down. She stopped recording. For a moment, the cabin was quiet. Then passengers began settling into their seats. The ground crew finished their preparations. The door closed. Karen Mitchell appeared at Darnell's row one final time. Mr. Washington, is there anything else I can do for you before we depart? Darnell looked at her. Karen, I want you to remember today, not just because of who I turned out to be. I want you to remember the moment when you saw a man in casual clothes and decided he was the problem without asking any questions. I will. And I want you to remember that the next passenger you see might not be a CEO. They might not have lawyers or resources or a platform. But they deserve the same respect I should have received today. Karen wiped her eyes. I understand. Good. Now go do your job. And do it better than you did today. Karen nodded and walked away. Darnell turned to look out the window. The sun was beginning to set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The aircraft pushed back from the gate and began taxiing toward the runway. Dr. Carter leaned across the aisle. Mr. Washington, yes. What you did today took tremendous courage. Most people would have just moved to coach to avoid the confrontation. Darnell considered this. Dr. Carter, I've spent my entire career building businesses, creating jobs, trying to make a difference, but you know what I've never been able to build? What's that? A world where my children can fly in peace, where they won't be questioned, where they won't have to prove they belong. You have children, 3, 2 daughters and a son, 24, 22, and 19. All of them have stories like mine. Different settings, same assumptions. Dr. Carter nodded slowly. My son is a surgeon, top of his class at Johns Hopkins. Last month he was stopped in the hospital hallway by a security guard who didn't believe he was a doctor. He was wearing his white coat and his ID badge. Still wasn't enough. Darnell closed his eyes. That's why today matters. Not for me. For them. For all the young people who deserve to move through the world without constantly having to justify their existence. The aircraft reached the runway and paused, waiting for clearance. Captain Reyes's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for takeoff. Flight time to Chicago will be approximately 4 hours. On behalf of the flight crew, I want to thank you for your patience during the delay. And I want to thank you for something else. For caring. For standing up. For refusing to look away when something wrong was happening. That kind of courage is rare. May we all be worthy of it. The engines roared. The aircraft accelerated down the runway and lifted into the sky. Thomas Reed turned to Darnell. Mr. Washington, when we land, I'd like to discuss something with you. What's that? A class action lawsuit. On behalf of every passenger who's experienced discrimination on Continental Pacific in the past 5 years. I'll work pro bono, you provide the platform and the resources. Together we could change this entire industry. Darnell looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Reed, you just met me today. You don't know anything about me except what you've seen in the past 2 hours. Thomas shrugged. I know enough. I know you had every reason to explode with anger, and instead you stayed calm. I know you could have bought your way out of this situation with a phone call, but instead you let it play out so the world could see. I know you're thinking about the people who don't have your resources. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Darnell nodded slowly. Let's talk in Chicago. The aircraft climbed through the clouds and leveled off. Below, Los Angeles sparkled in the gathering dusk. Ahead, Chicago waited. And in the cabin of Flight 892, 40 passengers sat in silence thinking about what they had witnessed. Thinking about assumptions and dignity and the price of prejudice. Thinking about a man in a polo shirt and khakis who refused to move from a seat he had paid for. And thinking about what they would do the next time they saw something wrong happening. The next time they had to choose between comfort and courage. Darnell Washington closed his eyes and allowed himself a moment of exhaustion. The hardest part was still ahead. The meetings, the negotiations, the systemic changes that would take years to implement. But for now, he was exactly where he belonged. Seat 2A, first class, flying toward whatever came next. The aircraft had been in the air for 47 minutes when Darnell's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from his chief legal counsel. Victoria Chen just called an emergency board meeting. All directors required. Video conference in 30 minutes. She's invoking crisis protocol. Darnell read the message twice, then looked out the window at the clouds below. Crisis protocol. That meant Victoria was treating this as an existential threat to the company. Good. That's exactly what it was. Thomas Reed noticed the change in Darnell's expression. News. The board is meeting in 30 minutes. Emergency session. Thomas raised an eyebrow. That's fast. Usually takes corporate boards days to respond to anything. Victoria Chen is smart. She knows every minute of delay makes the situation worse. Doctor. Carter leaned across the aisle. Mr. Washington, what happens at a board meeting like this? They'll assess the damage, review the footage, discuss liability, and they'll ask me what I want. What do you want? Darnell turned to look at her. I want what I've always wanted, Dr. Carter. I want a world where people are judged by their character, not their appearance. But since I can't legislate that into existence, I'll settle for systemic changes that make discrimination costly and accountability unavoidable. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his legal counsel, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox all requesting interviews. Destiny Williams' livestream has been viewed 4.2 million times. Stock down 6.3% since market close. Board members are panicking. Darnell typed a brief response. Tell them I'll make a statement after I land. No interviews until I've spoken with the board. He put the phone away and closed his eyes. 1 hour and 12 minutes into the flight, the cabin crew began serving dinner. A new flight attendant, a young woman named Christina, approached Darnell's seat with visible nervousness. Mr. Washington, I'm so sorry to disturb you. Can I get you anything? We have the chef's special tonight, or I can prepare something custom if you prefer. Darnell opened his eyes and looked at her. Christina, right? Yes, sir. How long have you been with Continental Pacific? 3 months, sir. And in those 3 months, have you ever seen anything like what happened at the gate today? Christina hesitated. She glanced around as if checking whether anyone was listening. Sir, I probably shouldn't say anything. Christina, I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble. I'm trying to understand how deep this problem goes. Christina bit her lip. I've seen things. Not as bad as what happened to you, but things. Passengers being questioned, seats being reassigned, comments being made. What kind of comments? Christina's voice dropped to a whisper. Last week, a flight attendant told me to keep an eye on a passenger because he looked suspicious. He was an elderly black man traveling alone. He didn't do anything suspicious. He just read his book and slept. But she had me check on him every 15 minutes. Darnell nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me that, Christina. Sir, please don't say I told you. I need this job. I won't mention your name, but I want you to know something. What's that? Changes are coming. Real changes. And when they do, I want you to remember that speaking up matters, even when it's scary, even when you think no one's listening. Christina's eyes glistened. Yes, sir. I'll remember. She took his dinner order and moved away, her hands still shaking slightly. Dr. Carter had been watching the exchange. That took courage. For her, I mean. Darnell nodded. The people at the bottom always know where the bodies are buried. They just don't feel safe saying anything. Thomas Reed was typing on his phone. I'm documenting everything. Witness statements, timeline quotes. By the time we land, I'll have a preliminary case file ready. Mr. Reed, have you ever taken on an airline before twice, won both times? But those were individual cases. What you're talking about is industry-wide reform. That's a different beast entirely. Then we'll need a different approach. Thomas looked at him with interest. What do you have in mind? Darnell's phone buzzed. The board meeting was about to begin. Hold that thought. He connected to the encrypted video conference using the aircraft's Wi-Fi. His screen filled with faces. Victoria Chen in the center. 8 board members arranged around her. The company's general counsel, the head of public relations. And in the corner of the screen, Jennifer Hayes, the regional director, who had arrived at the gate too late to prevent the disaster. Victoria spoke first. Darnell, thank you for joining us. I know this is unconventional, conducting a board meeting while you're in flight, but the situation demands immediate action. I appreciate the urgency, Victoria. Before we begin, I want to formally apologize on behalf of the entire board. What happened to you today was inexcusable. Several board members nodded. One of them, an older white man named William Patterson, spoke up. Mr. Washington, I've been on this board for 12 years. I've never seen anything like the footage from today. It was appalling. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Another board member, a black woman named Michelle Torres, leaned forward. Mr. Washington, I need to say something. When I joined this board 5 years ago, I raised concerns about our diversity and inclusion programs. I was told they were adequate. I was told I was overreacting. Today proved me right, but I take no satisfaction in that. I'm sorry we didn't listen sooner. Ms. Torres Darnell said quietly, You tried. That matters. Victoria cleared her throat. Darnell, we need to discuss remediation. What do you need from us? Darnell had been thinking about this since the plane left the ground. He had made lists in his head, prioritized, strategized. Now it was time to lay it all out. First, immediate termination of all employees directly involved in the discriminatory conduct. Megan Crawford, Captain Robert Miller, and a formal review of Karen Mitchell's conduct. Victoria nodded. Megan Crawford and Captain Miller have already been suspended pending termination proceedings. Karen Mitchell has been placed on administrative leave. Good. Second, I want a complete overhaul of your training programs, not a cosmetic refresh. A ground-up rebuild? Every customer-facing employee needs to undergo comprehensive bias recognition training within 60 days. William Patterson frowned. 60 days is extremely aggressive. We have over 40,000 customer-facing employees. Then you'd better start immediately. Victoria intervened. We can do 60 days. What else? Third, I want an independent oversight committee. Not internal. External. Staffed by civil rights experts, community leaders, and passenger advocates. They'll have access to all discrimination complaints and the authority to recommend disciplinary action. Michelle Torres nodded vigorously. I've been advocating for exactly that. An internal review process is worthless if the people doing the reviewing are the same people who created the problem. Fourth, Darnell continued, I want a passenger advocacy fund. $1 million minimum. Available to passengers who experience discrimination but don't have the resources to fight back on their own. A board member named Robert Chen, no relation to Victoria, spoke up. $1 million is significant. Where does that money come from? From your marketing budget? You spend $50 million a year telling people how great your airline is. Spend $1 million actually making it great. Robert Chen opened his mouth to object, then closed it. Victoria made a note. What else? Fifth, public accountability. Quarterly reports on discrimination complaints, resolution rates, and employee disciplinary actions. Published on your website for anyone to see. That's unprecedented, William Patterson said. No airline has ever done that. Then you'll be the first. The board members exchanged glances. Victoria leaned forward. Darnell, is there anything else? Darnell paused. This was the moment he had been building toward. Yes. One more thing. And this is non-negotiable. Go ahead. I want Gerald Hoffman banned from Continental Pacific flights. Permanently. The board went silent. Victoria's eyes widened. Mr. Hoffman, the passenger in 1A, the same. He actively participated in the discrimination. He told me to go to my real seat. He called me son. He defended the flight attendant's actions. He represents exactly the kind of customer complicity that allows discrimination to flourish. Robert Chen leaned forward. Mr. Washington, Gerald Hoffman is a significant customer. His company spends over $200,000 a year on Continental Pacific flights, and I spend $1.2 million. Are you really going to argue economics with me right now? Silence. Victoria spoke carefully. Darnell banning a passenger for their comments during an incident is legally complicated. We could face a lawsuit. Then face it. You discriminated against me, and you're worried about being sued by the man who cheered it on. The message that sends is exactly the problem. Michelle Torres nodded. He's right. If we ban passengers for being drunk or abusive to staff, we can certainly ban them for participating in discrimination against other passengers. William Patterson shook his head slowly. This is going to set a precedent. Good, Darnell said. It should. Every passenger should know that if they participate in discrimination, there will be consequences. Not just for the employees, for everyone involved. Victoria looked around the virtual room. I'm calling for a vote all in favor of implementing Mr. Washington's demands in full, including the lifetime ban on Gerald Hoffman. One by one, hands went up. Michelle Torres first, then Robert Chen, then William Patterson, one by one until all 8 board members had voted yes. Victoria nodded. Motion carries unanimously. Darnell, your demands are accepted. All of them. Thank you, Victoria. One more thing. Yes, I want Gerald Hoffman notified before we land. I want him to know that by the time this plane touches down in Chicago, he will never fly Continental Pacific again. Victoria hesitated for just a moment. It will be done. The video conference ended. Darnell sat back in his seat and exhaled slowly. Thomas Reed was staring at him with something like awe. You just got a passenger banned for life in real time. While we're still in the air, Mr. Reed Gerald Hoffman will survive not flying Continental Pacific. But every passenger who witnessed what happened today needs to know that there are consequences for participating in discrimination, not just for employees, for everyone. Dr. Carter was smiling. Mr. Washington, I have seen some impressive things in my career, but I have never seen anyone handle a crisis with such precision and purpose. Dr. Carter, I've had a lot of practice. At that moment, Gerald Hoffman's phone rang in the back of the first-class cabin. Everyone heard him answer. Hello, yes, this is Gerald Hoffman. What? That's impossible. You can't do that. Do you know who I am? I spend $200,000 a year with your airline. This is outrageous. I'll sue. I'll sue all of you. He was still shouting when a flight attendant approached him. Mr. Hoffman, I'm going to need you to lower your voice. Don't tell me to lower my voice. I've just been banned from this airline. Banned because of him, he pointed at Darnell. Every eye in the cabin turned to look. Darnell didn't turn around. He kept his gaze fixed on the window, on the clouds below, on the fading light of sunset. Dr. Carter spoke quietly. He seems upset. He made his choices. Now he's living with the consequences. Gerald Hoffman was still ranting. This is America. You can't ban someone for expressing their opinion. I have rights. I have lawyers. This isn't over. Do you hear me? This isn't over. The flight attendant's voice was firm. Mr. Hoffman, if you don't calm down immediately, I will have you restrained for the remainder of this flight and arrested upon landing. Gerald's voice choked off mid-sentence. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Silence. Then the sound of Gerald Hoffman dropping heavily into his seat. Dr. Carter shook her head. Some people never learn. Some people learn too late. Thomas Reed was typing furiously on his phone. I need to document this. The board vote. The ban. Hoffman's reaction. This is going to be the most important civil rights case in aviation history. Mr. Reed, it's not a case yet. It will be. And when it is, it's going to change everything. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into Chicago. We should be on the ground in approximately 45 minutes. The weather in Chicago is clear temperature 42 degrees. On behalf of the entire crew, thank you for your patience today, and thank you for reminding us what courage looks like. The passengers broke into spontaneous applause. Darnell Washington closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. 2 hours and 43 minutes into the flight, Destiny Williams made her way up the aisle to Darnell's seat. Mr. Washington, I hope you don't mind me interrupting. Ms. Williams, your live stream was impressive. Destiny smiled. 4.7 million views and counting. But that's not why I'm here. Why are you here? I want to tell you something. Before today, I had 300,000 followers. I built that audience talking about travel tips and hotel reviews. Fun stuff, easy stuff, nothing that mattered. And now I have over 1 million followers. And they're not following me for travel tips. They're following me because they saw something real today, something that mattered. What are you going to do with that platform? Destiny's eyes were serious. I'm going to use it. To document discrimination. To amplify voices that don't get heard. To make sure what happened to you today doesn't happen to anyone else in silence. Darnell studied her for a long moment. Ms. Williams, that's a dangerous path. You'll make enemies. You'll face backlash. Powerful people don't like being held accountable. I know, and you're willing to accept that, Mr. Washington, I'm a black woman in America. I've been accepting danger my whole life. At least now, I can do something meaningful with it. Darnell nodded slowly. Give me your contact information. I'd like to stay in touch. Destiny's face lit up. Really, the work I'm doing needs voices like yours. Young, authentic, unafraid. Together we can reach audiences I never could alone. Destiny handed him her card with trembling fingers. Thank you, Mr. Washington. You don't know what this means to me. Actually, I do. 25 years ago, someone took a chance on me, a mentor who saw something in a young man from the south side of Chicago. He opened doors. He made introductions. He believed in me before I believed in myself. Without him, none of this would exist. What happened to him? He passed away 8 years ago. But before he died, he made me promise something. What? That I would do for others what he did for me. That I would open doors, make introductions, believe in people before they believed in themselves. Destiny wiped her eyes. I won't let you down. I know you won't. She returned to her seat, her shoulders straighter than they had been before. Thomas Reed watched her go. You just changed that young woman's life. She changed her own life. I just pointed her in a direction. 3 hours and 15 minutes into the flight, the captain announced that they were 30 minutes from landing. Darnell's phone had been buzzing continuously. Messages from his staff, from his lawyers, from board members of his own company, from journalists requesting interviews. One message stood out. It was from his daughter, Maya. Dad, I just saw the video. I'm so proud of you. I'm also furious that this happened, but mostly proud. Call me when you land. I love you. Darnell typed a brief response. I love you too, sweetheart. Talk soon. Dr. Carter noticed the expression on his face. Family, my daughter. She saw the video. How old is she? 24. Just finished law school. She wants to work in civil rights, following in her father's footsteps. Darnell shook his head. No, she's going to do better than I ever did. Her generation is different. They don't accept things the way we did. They demand change. Is that a good thing? It's the only thing. Change doesn't come from people who accept the status quo. It comes from people who refuse to. Thomas Reed looked up from his phone. Mr. Washington, I just got confirmation. The Continental Pacific announcement has gone out. Gerald Hoffman is officially banned for life. It's already on the news. Darnell nodded. How's the market reacting? Stock is stabilizing. The board's quick action is being viewed positively. Analysts are calling it a masterclass in crisis management. They're not managing a crisis. They're responding to pressure. There's a difference. What's the difference? Crisis management is about protecting the company. What's happening here is about protecting passengers. The company's interests and the passengers' interests happen to align right now, but that won't always be the case. What happens when they don't align? Then we'll see what Victoria Chen and her board are really made of. The aircraft began its final descent into Chicago. The city lights sparkled below like a carpet of diamonds. Lake Michigan stretched black and endless to the east. Captain Reyes's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're making our final approach into Chicago O'Hare. We should be on the ground in approximately 10 minutes. On behalf of Continental Pacific Airlines, I want to thank you for flying with us today. And I want to say something personal." She paused. "I've been a pilot for 23 years. I've flown through storms, mechanical failures, medical emergencies. But I've never been more proud to wear this uniform than I am right now. What happened at Gate 17 in Los Angeles was wrong. And what happened afterward, the way this airline responded, the way you passengers responded, gives me hope that we can be better, that we will be better. Thank you for being part of that." The cabin was silent for a moment, then once again applause. Dr. Carter turned to Darnell. "Mr. Washington, whatever happens next, I want you to know that what you did today mattered. Not just for you, for all of us. Thank you, Dr. Carter. When we land, I'm going to call Northwestern Memorial and recommend that we implement a similar accountability system. Anonymous reporting, external oversight, public transparency. If it works for an airline, it can work for a hospital." Darnell smiled. "That's exactly the kind of ripple effect I was hoping for." Thomas Reed was gathering his things. "Mr. Washington, I'll have the preliminary case file ready within 48 hours. I'll need to interview witnesses, gather documentation, coordinate with your legal team. My office will be in touch tomorrow. First, I need to have a conversation with my family." "Of course." The wheels touched down with a gentle bump. The aircraft taxied toward the gate. Through the window, Darnell could see the terminal lights blazing in the darkness. Somewhere inside, reporters were waiting. Questions were waiting. The next chapter of this story was waiting. But for one moment, he allowed himself to simply breathe. It had been 4 hours since a flight attendant had told him to move to the back. 4 hours since he had refused. 4 hours that would change an industry forever. The aircraft reached the gate. The seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers began gathering their belongings. Darnell Washington stood up, collected his backpack, and prepared to face whatever came next. Behind him, Gerald Hoffman sat motionless in the last row of first class, his face buried in his hands. In front of him, the door opened onto a world that would never be quite the same. Darnell stepped forward. The cameras were waiting. The moment Darnell stepped off the jetway into Chicago O'Hare, the flash of cameras blinded him. 15 reporters had gathered behind the security barrier, shouting questions over each other in a chaos of noise and light. "Mr. Washington, can you tell us what happened on that flight? Mr. Washington, are you planning to sue Continental Pacific? Mr. Washington, how do you feel about Gerald Hoffman being banned? Mr. Washington, over here, please." Darnell raised one hand. The shouting stopped almost immediately. That was the power of presence of a man who had spent 30 years commanding boardrooms. "I'll make a brief statement and then I'll take 3 questions." The reporters fell silent, cameras still flashing. "Today I was denied service in my paid first-class seat on Continental Pacific Flight 892. The denial was based solely on my appearance. I was asked to move to coach. I was accused of fraud. I was treated like a criminal for the simple act of sitting in a seat I had purchased." He paused. "I am fortunate. I have resources. I have lawyers. I have a platform. I was able to fight back. But what about the thousands of passengers who experience similar treatment and have none of those things? What happens to them?" a reporter shouted from the back. "What do you want to happen now?" "I want systemic change. Not apologies, not settlements. Change. Continental Pacific has agreed to implement comprehensive reforms, including new training programs, independent oversight, and a passenger advocacy fund. I will be monitoring their progress personally." Another reporter pushed forward. "Mr. Washington, Gerald Hoffman has released a statement saying he's going to sue Continental Pacific for banning him. He says his free speech rights were violated." "What's your response?" Darnell almost smiled. "Mr. Hoffman has the right to sue anyone he wants, but free speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. He chose to participate in discrimination. He chose to tell me to go to my real seat. He chose to defend the flight attendant who was mistreating me. Those choices have consequences." A third reporter, a young woman from CNN, managed to get his attention. "Mr. Washington, what would you say to other passengers who experience discrimination but don't have your resources?" Darnell looked directly into her camera. "Document everything. Record when you can. Report every incident. And know that you are not alone. Starting next week, The Washington Foundation will launch a passenger advocacy hotline, free legal consultation, free documentation assistance. No one should have to face discrimination alone. The reporters erupted with more questions, but Darnell raised his hand again. That's all for now. Thank you. He turned and walked through the terminal, his security team materializing around him. Behind him, the reporters were already filing their stories, their phones pressed to their ears. Thomas Reed caught up with him. That was masterful. The advocacy hotline was a nice touch. It's not a touch, Mr. Reed. It's something I've been planning for 2 years. Today just accelerated the timeline. Dr. Carter appeared at his other side. Mr. Washington, I wanted to say goodbye before I head to my gate, and I wanted to give you this. She handed him a business card. If you ever need medical expertise for your advocacy work, I'm at your disposal. Pro bono. Darnell took the card. Thank you, Dr. Carter. I suspect I'll be taking you up on that. She shook his hand firmly, then disappeared into the crowd. Destiny Williams was waiting near the baggage claim, her phone still recording. Mr. Washington, one more thing before you go. Yes, Ms. Williams, I just want you to know that my followers are already organizing. There's a petition circulating demanding that other airlines implement the same reforms Continental Pacific agreed to. It's got 50,000 signatures in the last hour. Darnell nodded slowly. That's the power of collective action. One person can spark change, but it takes many people to sustain it. Will you share the petition? Send me the link. I'll share it with my network tonight. Destiny's face lit up. Thank you, Mr. Washington, for everything. Thank you, Ms. Williams. You turned a phone camera into a weapon for justice. That's not nothing. She hugged him impulsively, then pulled back, embarrassed. Sorry, Thank you. Darnell smiled. Stay in touch. He walked toward the exit where his driver was waiting. But before he reached the doors, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. From Victoria Chen. Darnell, we have a problem. Call me immediately. He stepped into a quiet corner and dialed. Victoria answered on the first ring. Darnell, thank you for calling. We have a situation. What kind of situation? Gerald Hoffman's lawyers have filed an emergency injunction to prevent his ban from taking effect. They're claiming we violated his civil rights and demanding reinstatement of his flight privileges immediately. Darnell's jaw tightened. On what grounds? They're arguing that banning a passenger for expressing opinions during a dispute constitutes viewpoint discrimination. They're citing the First Amendment. Victoria Continental Pacific is a private company. The First Amendment doesn't apply. I know that. You know that. But Hoffman's lawyers are very good, and they found a sympathetic judge. We have a hearing tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Chicago Federal Court. Darnell was silent for a moment. Who's the judge? Victoria hesitated. Harold Morrison? Darnell knew that name. Judge Harold Morrison was 73 years old, appointed during the Reagan administration, and had a long history of ruling in favor of corporate interest and against civil rights plaintiffs. That's not a coincidence, he said quietly. No, it isn't. Hoffman's lawyers must have judge shopped. What do you need from me? I need you at that hearing tomorrow. I need you to testify about what happened. And I need you to help me find a way to keep this ban in place. I'll be there. Darnell. Yes, thank you. I know you don't owe us anything. After what happened today, you'd be justified in walking away and letting us deal with this alone. Victoria walking away has never been my style. He ended the call and stood in the quiet corner of the terminal, thinking. Gerald Hoffman wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting to establish a precedent. If he won this case, it would send a message to every discriminatory passenger in America: you can participate in racism, and if anyone tries to hold you accountable, you can sue your way out of consequences. That could not be allowed to happen. Darnell called Thomas Reed. Mr. Reed, change of plans. I need you in Chicago tomorrow morning. Federal Courthouse, 9 a.m. What happened? Gerald Hoffman is fighting his ban. Emergency injunction. Judge Harold Morrison. Thomas whistled low. Morrison? That's going to be an uphill battle. I know. Can you do it, Mr. Washington? I've spent 20 years fighting uphill battles. This is what I live for. Good. Meet me at my office in 2 hours. We have a long night ahead of us. He hung up and walked out of the terminal into the cold Chicago night. His driver, Marcus, was waiting by the car. Mr. Washington, I saw the news. Are you all right? I'm fine, Marcus. But we have work to do. Where to, sir? The office. And Marcus, yes, sir. Thank you for asking if I was all right. Not everyone does. Marcus nodded his eyes, meeting Darnell's in the rearview mirror. My father worked for an airline for 30 years. Baggage handler. I heard stories growing up. What happened to you today, it happens more than people know. It's just usually nobody sees it. Tonight, 60 million people saw it. Marcus smiled. Good. The drive to Washington Holdings headquarters took 23 minutes. By the time they arrived, the building was blazing with light despite the late hour. Word had spread and key staff had come in without being asked. His chief of staff, Andrea Morrison, met him at the elevator. "Mr. Washington, we've been monitoring the situation. I've compiled a briefing packet on Judge Morrison Gerald Hoffman's legal team and relevant case law. It's on your desk." "Thank you, Andrea." "Who's here?" "Legal team is assembling in conference room A. Communications is drafting press responses." "Your daughter is waiting in your office, Maya. She flew in from New York, said she wasn't going to let you face this alone." Darnell felt something loosen in his chest. "That girl. She's not a girl anymore, sir. She's a force of nature." Darnell walked into his office to find Maya Washington sitting in his chair, her laptop open, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She looked up when he entered, and her eyes filled with tears. "Dad?" She was across the room and in his arms before he could say a word. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "And so angry, and so proud. I'm okay, sweetheart. I know you're okay. That's not the point. The point is you shouldn't have had to go through that." She pulled back and looked at him. "I watched the whole video, every second. When that flight attendant told you to move, I wanted to reach through the screen and shake her. A lot of people felt that way, apparently. Dad, I've been researching Judge Morrison. He's going to be a problem." "I know, but I found something. 3 years ago, he ruled against a hotel chain that tried to ban a guest for causing a disturbance. He said private businesses have broad discretion in who they serve, but they can't use that discretion arbitrarily. That sounds like it could cut either way. It could. But the key is the word arbitrarily. If we can show that Continental Pacific's ban on Hoffman was based on a clear policy violation, not just personal dislike, we might be able to get Morrison to uphold it." Darnell looked at his daughter with new appreciation. "When did you get so smart? I learned from the best." Thomas Reed arrived at 11:47 p.m. He looked tired, but focused his briefcase bulging with documents. "Mr. Washington, I've been on the phone with Continental Pacific's legal team. They're willing to let me take the lead on tomorrow's hearing, but I need something from you." "What do you need?" "I need you to testify, not about what happened on the plane, about why you pushed for the ban. I need to establish that this wasn't about revenge. It was about policy." "I can do that. There's something else. I found 4 other passengers who witnessed the incident and are willing to testify. Dr. Evelyn Carter, Destiny Williams, and 2 others, James Chen from 6B and Margaret Foster from 4A. They all saw Hoffman's behavior and are willing to go on record. All of them, all of them. Dr. Carter is flying back from Detroit. Destiny is already here. The others are driving in from the suburbs." Darnell shook his head slowly. "Mr. Reed, you've been busy. Mr. Washington, what happened today was wrong. Hoffman trying to escape consequences for his role in it would be even more wrong. I'm not going to let that happen. They worked through the night. Andrea kept coffee flowing. Maya researched case law. Thomas prepared witness statements. Darnell reviewed everything, adding his own perspective, refining arguments. At 3:15 a.m., his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Mr. Washington, this is Megan Crawford. I know I have no right to contact you, but I need you to know something. I've been fired. I deserved it, but I also want to tell you what happened after you left Los Angeles." Darnell stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed a response. "I'm listening." The phone rang almost immediately. Megan Crawford's voice was hoarse, like she had been crying. "Mr. Washington, thank you for taking my call. Ms. Crawford, it's 3 a.m. Make it quick." "Yes, sir." After the plane left, there was a meeting. Karen Mitchell, Jennifer Hayes, and several other supervisors. They were discussing how to minimize the damage, how to spin the story. "Go on." One of them, I won't say who, suggested that they could claim you had been disruptive, that you had raised your voice, that you had threatened them. They wanted to create a false narrative to protect themselves. Darnell's grip on the phone tightened. And what happened? Jennifer Hayes shut it down. She said the footage was everywhere, and lying would only make things worse. But the fact that they even considered it, Mr. Washington, it made me realize how deep this problem goes. It's not just individual prejudice. It's institutional. Why are you telling me this? Because I was part of it. For 12 years, I was part of a system that treated people differently based on how they looked. I told myself I was just doing my job. I told myself I wasn't racist. But today, I saw myself on that video, and I didn't recognize the person I had become. Ms. Crawford, what do you want from me? I don't want anything. I just needed you to know that not everyone at Continental Pacific is going to support the changes you're demanding. There are people who think you're the problem, who think you overreacted, who think Hoffman is a victim. Thank you for the warning. And Mr. Washington, yes, I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough, but I needed to say them. She hung up before he could respond. Darnell set the phone down and looked at Maya, who had been listening. She was crying, Maya said quietly. She discriminated against me because of my skin color. Then she called to apologize and warn me about corporate resistance. People are complicated. Yes, they are. Thomas Reed looked up from his documents. What did she say about the false narrative Darnell told him? Thomas nodded slowly. That's useful. If Continental Pacific's own employee is willing to testify that there was an attempt to cover up the incident, it strengthens our argument that the company's reforms are genuine. Would she testify? I don't know. She's just been fired. She might want to disappear, or she might want redemption. Darnell picked up the phone and called Megan Crawford back. She answered on the first ring. Mr. Washington. Ms. Crawford, would you be willing to testify tomorrow? Silence. Then in a voice that was barely a whisper, yes, be at the Chicago Federal Courthouse at 8 a.m. Bring everything you know. He ended the call. Maya was staring at him. Dad, you just recruited the woman who discriminated against you to testify on your behalf. I recruited a witness who can prove that discrimination at Continental Pacific is systemic, not individual. There's a difference. Thomas Reed was grinning. Mr. Washington, you are a master strategist. Mr. Reed, I'm just a man who wants to win. Now let's get back to work. At 6:30 a.m., Andrea brought fresh coffee and breakfast. The team ate quickly, reviewing final preparations. At 7:15, they loaded into cars and headed for the federal courthouse. At 7:45, they arrived to find a crowd already gathering. Reporters, protesters, supporters, the story had taken on a life of its own. Destiny Williams was there live streaming again. Y'all were at the Chicago Federal Courthouse. The hearing starts in 1 hour. Gerald Hoffman is trying to overturn his ban, but look at this crowd. People aren't going to let this go quietly. Dr. Carter arrived at 7:52 looking exhausted but determined. Mr. Washington. I got on a red-eye from Detroit. I'm not missing this. Thank you, Dr. Carter. James Chen and Margaret Foster arrived together at 8:03. They were both in their 60s, retired teachers who had been flying home from a conference. We couldn't believe what we were seeing, James said. That poor man treated like a criminal for sitting in his own seat. When Mr. Reed called us, we didn't even hesitate. Margaret nodded. My father was Japanese-American. He was interned during World War II. I know what discrimination looks like. I know how it feels. I wasn't going to stay silent. At 8:15, Megan Crawford arrived. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. I don't know if I can do this, she said to Darnell. You can. You have to. This is how redemption works. You face what you did, and you try to make it right. Megan took a deep breath. Okay. At 8:45, they entered the courthouse. Gerald Hoffman was already there, surrounded by 3 lawyers in expensive suits. He saw Darnell, and his face twisted with hatred. This is your fault, he spat. You've ruined me. Darnell didn't respond. He simply walked past, heading for the courtroom. Thomas Reed leaned in. Don't let him get to you. He's trying to provoke a reaction. I know. I've been dealing with men like Gerald Hoffman my entire life. At 9 a.m. precisely, Judge Harold Morrison entered the courtroom. He was 73 years old, white-haired, with the stern face of a man who had spent his entire career wielding power. This court is now in session. The matter before us is Hoffman versus Continental Pacific Airlines. Mr. Hoffman claims his civil rights were violated when the airline banned him for life following an incident on Flight 892. Mr. Hoffman's counsel, you may proceed. Gerald's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Douglas Whitmore, stood. Your Honor, my client is a victim of corporate overreach. He expressed his opinions during a dispute on an aircraft, and for that, he has been banned from an airline he has patronized for 15 years. This is a clear violation of his First Amendment rights. Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. Counselor, the First Amendment restricts government action, not private companies. Your Honor, Continental Pacific receives federal subsidies and operates under federal regulations. They function as a quasi-governmental entity and should be held to First Amendment standards. Thomas Reed stood. Your Honor, if I may. Morrison nodded. Proceed. Continental Pacific is a private corporation. Federal subsidies and regulations do not convert it into a governmental actor. If they did, every subsidized industry in America would be subject to First Amendment claims. That would be absurd. Morrison leaned back. Mr. Whitmore, do you have any case law supporting your position? Whitmore shuffled his papers. We're arguing for an expansion of existing doctrine, Your Honor. In other words, no. Thomas pressed his advantage. Your Honor, we move to dismiss on the grounds that the plaintiff has no valid constitutional claim. Morrison considered this. Mr. Whitmore, give me one good reason why I shouldn't dismiss right now. Whitmore straightened. Because even if the First Amendment doesn't apply, Continental Pacific's ban was arbitrary and capricious. They banned my client for expressing opinions. If companies can ban customers for speech, we're opening a dangerous door. Morrison looked at Thomas. Counsel, Your Honor, the ban was not based on Mr. Hoffman's speech. It was based on his conduct. He actively participated in the discriminatory treatment of another passenger. He encouraged airline staff to remove Mr. Washington from his seat. He made derogatory comments. This wasn't protected speech. This was participation in discrimination. Morrison nodded slowly. I'd like to hear from Mr. Washington himself. Darnell stood. Your Honor, I'm Darnell Washington. Mr. Washington, tell me in your own words what happened on that flight. Darnell spoke for 12 minutes. He described every detail, every assumption, every insult, every moment of humiliation. When he finished, the courtroom was silent. Morrison looked at Gerald Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman, do you deny saying the things Mr. Washington described? Gerald's face was red. I was trying to help defuse the situation by telling a paying first-class passenger to go to his real seat. That's not what I meant. What did you mean I just meant? He didn't look like... I was just... Gerald trailed off. Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Hoffman, I've been a judge for 31 years. I've heard a lot of excuses. But I don't think I've ever heard someone try so hard to avoid saying what they obviously meant. He turned to Thomas. Counsel, do you have witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. 4 passengers who witnessed the incident and 1 former Continental Pacific employee. Let's hear from them. One by one they testified. Dr. Carter described the discrimination she witnessed. Destiny Williams described what her viewers saw. James Chen and Margaret Foster described their shock and outrage. And then Megan Crawford took the stand. Ms. Crawford, you were the flight attendant who initially confronted Mr. Washington, yes. And you've since been terminated, yes. Why are you here today? Because I was wrong. I looked at Mr. Washington and decided he didn't belong in first class. I didn't check his documents properly. I assumed he was lying. And Mr. Hoffman encouraged me. He told Mr. Washington to go to his real seat. He called him son. He said if Mr. Washington had dressed like he belonged, there wouldn't have been a problem. Gerald's face went purple. She's lying. Morrison slammed his gavel. Mr. Hoffman, one more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Thomas approached Megan. Ms. Crawford, after the incident, was there any discussion about creating a false narrative to protect the airline? Megan hesitated. Yes, some supervisors discussed claiming that Mr. Washington had been disruptive or threatening. Jennifer Hayes, the regional director, shut it down. Gerald's lawyers were whispering frantically. Morrison looked at Gerald. Mr. Hoffman, do you have anything to say? Gerald stood, his hands shaking with rage. This is a conspiracy. They're all in on it. That man ruined my life, and now he's buying witnesses to destroy me completely. Morrison's voice was ice. Mr. Hoffman, sit down. Gerald kept ranting. I'm a successful businessman. I employ hundreds of people. And I'm being treated like a criminal because I expressed my opinion. Your opinion was that a black man didn't belong in first class. I never said that. You didn't have to. Morrison stood. I've heard enough. Mr. Hoffman's motion for injunction is denied. Continental Pacific's ban stands. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the Department of Transportation for investigation of potential civil rights violations. He gathered his papers. Mr. Washington, what happened to you was wrong. Mr. Hoffman, your attempt to escape consequences for your conduct was equally wrong. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in cheers. Destiny Williams was streaming to her largest audience ever. Y'all, we won the bandstands. Gerald Hoffman tried to sue his way out of consequences, and he lost. Dr. Carter hugged Darnell. Justice, she said simply. Thomas Reed was already on his phone coordinating with press. Megan Crawford stood apart from the celebration looking lost. Darnell approached her. Ms. Crawford, Mr. Washington, I don't know what happens now. I've lost my job, my reputation, everything. You have something more important than any of those things. What's that a chance to start over? To be better? Take it. He walked away, leaving her standing alone in the morning light. Maya was waiting by the car. Dad, you did it. We did it. All of us. What happens now? Now the real work begins. Changing systems, changing cultures, changing minds. That could take years. Then we'd better get started. They got in the car and drove away, leaving the courthouse behind. But the story was far from over. It was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the courthouse victory, and Darnell Washington stood at the podium of the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, looking out at an audience of 800 people who had come to hear him speak. The room was silent, waiting. 6 months ago, he began, I was told to move to the back of an airplane. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 6 months ago, a flight attendant looked at me and decided I didn't belong in first class. She didn't check my documents. She didn't ask questions. She just saw a black man in casual clothes and made a decision. He paused. Today, I'm here to tell you what happened next. Not just to me, to an entire industry. The presentation screen behind him flickered to life. Charts, graphs, statistics. In the 6 months since the Continental Pacific incident, discrimination complaints across all major airlines have dropped by 67%. 67%. Applause erupted, but that's not the number I want you to focus on. The screen changed. This is the number that matters. 4,312. He let the number hang in the air. That's how many passengers have called our advocacy hotline in the past 6 months. 4,000 people who experienced discrimination and finally had somewhere to turn. 4,000 people who were told they didn't belong, and instead of accepting it, they fought back. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. Every single one of those calls represents a human being who was humiliated, who was questioned, who was made to feel less than. And every single one of those calls represents a human being who refused to let that humiliation be the end of the story. He stepped away from the podium. I want to introduce you to some of those people. First, Angela Martinez. A young Latina woman rose from her seat in the third row and walked to the stage. She was perhaps 30, with determined eyes and nervous hands. Angela, tell them what happened to you. Angela took a deep breath. 3 months ago, I was flying home from my grandmother's funeral. I was in first class because my company had upgraded me. The flight attendant asked to see my boarding pass 3 times. She asked me if I was sure I was in the right seat. She asked me if someone had given me the ticket. Finally, she asked me if I was the nanny for someone traveling in first class. Gasps from the audience. I called the hotline. They helped me file a complaint. They connected me with a lawyer. And last week, the airline settled. Not just with me, with 47 other passengers who had similar experiences. She looked at Darnell. Mr. Washington, you gave me the courage to fight. Thank you. Darnell nodded. Angela, you gave yourself that courage. I just gave you the tools. She returned to her seat. Darnell turned back to the audience. Next, I want you to meet Marcus Thompson. An elderly black man rose slowly from his wheelchair. He was perhaps 75, with white hair and weathered hands that had seen decades of hard work. Marcus, tell them your story. Marcus's voice was soft but clear. I served in Vietnam. 2 tours. Bronze Star. Purple Heart. I've been flying for 50 years. And 3 months ago, a gate agent told me I looked suspicious. She called security. They searched my bags. They questioned me for an hour. I missed my flight. I missed my granddaughter's graduation. His voice cracked. I've been called a lot of things in my life, but I've never been called suspicious for standing in an airport with my boarding pass in my hand. The audience was silent. I called the hotline. They listened. They helped. And now that airline has a new policy. Veterans are no longer subject to random additional screening. It's a small thing, but it matters. He looked at Darnell. You did that, son. Darnell's voice was thick. No, sir. You did that. By speaking up, by refusing to let them get away with it. Marcus returned to his seat and the audience rose in a standing ovation. Darnell waited for the applause to subside. I could introduce you to hundreds of people like Angela and Marcus. People who were told they didn't belong. People who were questioned and searched and humiliated. But I want to show you something else. Something that proves change is possible. The screen changed again. This is a letter I received last week. From Megan Crawford. The audience stirred. Everyone knew that name. For those who don't remember, Megan Crawford was the flight attendant who told me to move to the back of the plane. She was fired. She testified at the Hoffman hearing, and then she disappeared. He held up the letter. She's been working for the past 6 months, not at an airline, at a community center in South Los Angeles, teaching bias recognition workshops to young people. Here's what she wrote. He began to read. Dear Mr. Washington, 6 months ago I was the person everyone hated. I deserved it. What I did to you was wrong, and I've spent every day since trying to understand how I became that person. I grew up in a small town where everyone looked like me. I never questioned my assumptions because I never had to. When I saw you sitting in first class, I didn't see a human being. I saw a threat to the order I had been taught to believe in. I was wrong. I'm writing because I want you to know that your foundation's training materials have changed my life. I use them every day in my workshops. Last week, a teenager came up to me after class and said she had been about to confront a Muslim woman wearing a hijab on a bus because she looked suspicious. Instead, she stopped herself and asked why she felt that way. She realized she had no reason except prejudice. That's one person who didn't discriminate because of what you built. I know I can never undo what I did to you, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to prevent others from making the same mistake. Thank you for giving me that chance. Megan Crawford. Darnell set down the letter. This is what redemption looks like. Not perfection, not erasure of the past, but genuine effort to be better, to do better, to help others be better. A voice from the audience called out, "Mr. Washington, what happened to Gerald Hoffman?" Darnell smiled grimly. "I'm glad you asked." The screen changed to show a news headline, "Hoffman Development Group files for bankruptcy protection." After the court ruling, Gerald Hoffman's business partners began distancing themselves. His clients canceled contracts. His investors withdrew funding. 2 months ago, his company collapsed. Scattered applause from the audience, but that's not the end of the story. Last month, I received a phone call from Gerald Hoffman himself. The audience went completely silent. He wanted to meet. He said he had something to tell me. I agreed. Darnell paused. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Chicago. He looked different, older, broken. He sat down across from me and he said I was wrong. The audience leaned forward. He said he had spent his entire life believing certain things about certain people. He said those beliefs had cost him everything. His business, his marriage, his relationship with his children. His daughter had stopped speaking to him after the video went viral. Darnell's voice softened. He asked me to forgive him. Someone in the audience gasped. I told him that forgiveness wasn't mine to give. I was just one person he had wronged. There were thousands of others who had experienced similar treatment and would never get an apology. He looked out at the crowd. But I told him something else. I told him that if he was serious about change, he could prove it. Not with words, with actions. The screen changed to show a photograph of Gerald Hoffman standing next to Darnell at a press conference. 3 weeks ago, Gerald Hoffman donated $2 million to the Washington Foundation's Passenger Advocacy Fund. He's also agreed to speak at corporate diversity training sessions about his own journey from prejudice to understanding. The audience erupted. Darnell raised his hand for silence. I know some of you think I shouldn't have accepted his money. I know some of you think I shouldn't have given him a platform. But here's what I believe. People can change. Not all of them. Not easily. But some of them if they're willing to do the work. He stepped back to the podium. Gerald Hoffman will never undo what he did on that airplane. But if his story convinces one executive to examine their own biases, if his money helps one passenger fight back against discrimination, then something good will have come from something terrible. Dr. Evelyn Carter rose from her seat in the second row. Mr. Washington, may I say something, please? Dr. Carter walked to the stage. 6 months ago, I watched a man refuse to move from his seat. I watched him face humiliation with dignity. I watched him turn a moment of injustice into a movement for change. She turned to face the audience. Since that day, I've implemented similar reforms at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Anonymous reporting, external oversight, bias training, and the results have been remarkable. Patient satisfaction among minority communities has increased by 43%. Staff complaints about discriminatory treatment have dropped by 58%. She looked at Darnell. This man didn't just change an airline. He changed how we think about accountability. He showed us that systemic problems require systemic solutions. And he proved that one person in one moment can spark a revolution. The audience rose in another standing ovation. When the applause finally subsided, Darnell spoke again. There's one more person I want you to hear from, someone who has been with me since the beginning. Maya Washington rose from her seat and walked to the stage. She was 24 years old, poised and confident with her father's eyes and her mother's grace. Most of you know me as Darnell Washington's daughter, but today I want to speak to you as Maya Washington, as a young black woman trying to make her way in the world. She turned to face the audience. When I was 12 years old, my father and I were shopping at a department store. A security guard followed us for 20 minutes. Finally, he stopped us and asked to see our receipts. My father had purchased $3,000 worth of merchandise. He had every receipt. The guard apologized and walked away. She paused. On the drive home, I asked my father why that had happened. He told me something I've never forgotten. He said, Maya, some people will look at you and see a threat before they see a person. That's not your fault. But how you respond to that is your choice. You can let it make you bitter, or you can let it make you better. Her voice strengthened. My father chose to be better, every single day of his life. When he built his company, he hired people who looked like him and people who didn't. When he created his foundation, he funded programs that helped everyone. And when he was told to move to the back of an airplane, he refused. Not because he was angry, because he knew that his refusal could help others. She looked at her father. Dad, you've spent your whole life opening doors for people. Today I want to open a door for you. She pulled an envelope from her pocket. This morning I received a call from the President of the United States. The audience gasped. She handed the envelope to Darnell. He opened it with trembling hand. The Presidential Medal of Freedom, Maya said, her voice breaking, for extraordinary contributions to civil rights and social justice. Darnell stared at the letter, tears streaming down his face. The audience erupted in the longest, loudest standing ovation of the night. When the noise finally subsided, Darnell wiped his eyes and looked at his daughter. Maya, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Dad. You've said it all with your actions. She hugged him, and for a moment they were just a father and daughter holding each other while 800 people watched. Then Darnell stepped back to the podium. I have one more announcement to make. The audience settled. Today I'm launching a new initiative. The Dignity in Travel Coalition. 23 airlines have signed on. 4 major hotel chains. 3 car rental companies, and the Department of Transportation has agreed to implement federal oversight of discrimination complaints. The screen displayed the logos of the participating companies. This coalition commits to zero tolerance for discrimination, mandatory bias training, anonymous reporting systems, external audits, and real consequences for those who fail to meet the standards. He looked out at the audience. 6 months ago, I was one man on one airplane refusing to move from my seat. Today, I represent a movement of millions. People who refuse to accept discrimination as normal. People who demand accountability from the institutions that serve them. People who believe that dignity is not a privilege. It's a right. He paused. But I want to be clear about something. This isn't about me. It was never about me. I'm just one person who happened to have the resources and the platform to fight back. The real heroes are the people who face discrimination every day and keep going, who raise their children to believe in their own worth, who show up to work and do their jobs despite the bias they encounter, who refuse to let prejudice define them. His voice rose. The real heroes are the Angela Martinezes and the Marcus Thompsons, the flight attendants who speak up when they see something wrong, the passengers who intervene when they witness discrimination, the CEOs who choose accountability over convenience. He looked at Victoria Chen, who was sitting in the 4th row. Victoria, stand up. Victoria Chen rose, looking uncomfortable. 6 months ago, Victoria Chen had a choice. She could have protected her company. She could have minimized the incident. She could have blamed me for causing a disruption. Instead, she chose accountability. She implemented every reform I demanded, and more. Continental Pacific's customer satisfaction ratings have increased by 31%. Their stock price has recovered fully and is now at an all-time high. He looked at her. Victoria, you proved that doing the right thing and doing the profitable thing don't have to be different things. Victoria nodded, her eyes glistening. Darnell turned back to the audience. I started this speech by telling you that I was told to move to the back of an airplane. I want to end it by telling you what that moment taught me. He stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage. It taught me that prejudice is not inevitable. It's a choice. Every person who looked at me that day made a choice about how to see me. Megan Crawford chose to see a scammer. Gerald Hoffman chose to see someone who didn't belong. Captain Miller chose to see a troublemaker. His voice dropped. But Dr. Evelyn Carter chose to see injustice. Thomas Reed chose to see a legal violation. Destiny Williams chose to see a story that needed to be told. Marcus Johnson chose to see the truth. He looked at the faces before him. Every day, each one of you makes choices about how to see the people around you. Every day, you decide whether to look at someone and see a threat or a human being, whether to assume the worst or give the benefit of the doubt, whether to stay silent or speak up. His voice rose to fill the room. Those choices matter. They shape the world we live in. They determine whether our children will face the same prejudices we faced or something better. They decide whether the next person who is told to move to the back of an airplane will have to fight alone or will have an army behind them. He paused. 6 months ago, I refused to move. Today, I'm asking you to do the same. The audience was on its feet before he finished speaking. Destiny Williams was live streaming from the front row. Y'all, she said, her voice thick with emotion, this is what change looks like, not one hero, not one moment, but millions of people making the choice to do better, to be better, to demand better. Her viewer count showed 12 million. Darnell raised his hand for silence one final time. Before I go, I want to share one last story. Last week, I flew from Chicago to Los Angeles. Continental Pacific, first class. The audience laughed. When I boarded, the flight attendant looked at me. She saw a black man in casual clothes, and she said, Mr. Washington, welcome aboard. Your seat is right this way. Is there anything I can get you? He smiled. I said, just some water, please, and maybe a little dignity. She looked at me, and she said, Sir, dignity comes standard in first class. The audience erupted in laughter and applause. That's the world I'm fighting for, Darnell said when the noise subsided. A world where dignity comes standard. For everyone, everywhere, every time. He looked out at the sea of faces. Thank you for being part of this journey. Thank you for refusing to stay silent. Thank you for believing that change is possible. He stepped back from the edge of the stage. Now let's get back to work. We've got a lot more changing to do. The applause followed him as he walked off the stage as Maya took his hand as Dr. Carter and Thomas Reed and Destiny Williams gathered around him. Outside, the night was clear and cold. Stars scattered across the Memphis sky like diamonds on velvet. Darnell looked up at them. Dad, Maya said softly, how do you feel? He considered the question. I feel like I'm just getting started. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Mr. Washington, my name is James. I'm 14 years old. I watched your speech. Last month, I was followed around a store because someone thought I was going to steal something. I didn't know what to do. Now I do. Thank you. Darnell showed the message to Maya. This is why we do it, he said. For him. For every kid who deserves to walk through a store without being followed. Every passenger who deserves to sit in their seat without being questioned. Every person who deserves to be seen as a human being first. Maya squeezed his hand. You changed the world, Dad. No, Darnell said, looking at the stars. The world was always capable of being better. I just reminded it. They walked to the car together, father and daughter, surrounded by friends and allies. Behind them, the National Civil Rights Museum stood illuminated against the night sky, a monument to all the battles that had been fought and all the battles yet to come. And somewhere in America, a young black man boarded an airplane, took his seat in first class, and no one asked him to move. No one questioned his documents. No one assumed he didn't belong. Because that's what change looks like. Not perfect, not complete, but real. One seat at a time. One choice at a time. One person at a time. Until the day when the question of who belongs is answered. The same way for everyone. Everyone belongs. Everywhere. Always. And that is not a hope. That is not a dream. That is a promise. A promise that Darnell Washington made on a spring afternoon when he refused to move from seat 2A. A promise that millions of people have now joined him in keeping. A promise that will outlast all of them. Because dignity is not a privilege. It is a right. And rights once won are never surrendered. Not 1 inch, not 1 seat, not ever again.